What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Adam SRC YouTube channel. And in today's video, we're going to be working on getting this thing finally under its own weight, and hopefully it doesn't have to be on the cart anymore. We're going to be working on the rear suspension and then connecting it back up to the front half of the frame. And if we get lucky, I might even start working on the drivetrain. Depends how things go. Even though I haven't been working on this in the last few months, I have been busy collecting parts. That way, for these next few weeks, I can just build, rather than wait on parts that I've ordered. But anyhow, let's go check out some of those parts I got in. Right here in this pile, I should have everything I need to complete the rear axle of this build. We've got a swing arm off of a 2008 YFZ 450 that was given to me by a buddy, and he also threw in a brake caliper bracket along with a Lone Star Racing bearing carrier. So I'm very thankful for that, because that is a very valuable part, and this just set me ahead quite a ways and saved me a lot of money. Right here, I've got some seals to throw in this. The bearings are still on their way, but they're going to be here tomorrow. So it won't be long before I can start mocking this all up. And then, of course, here we've got a niche rear axle that is +4. So it's 4 inches over stock, which I'm going to need for this build for the good stability. Then right here, we've got some swing arm bearings to go right in there, the pivot bearings. Then we've got the actual pivot shaft right there, along with a sprocket and hub, the brake rotor and hub, and then some other miscellaneous items, including an extra sprocket. Right here, I also want to mention is the bolt, or a bolt that would go in place of the OEM bolt right here. That's a specialty one, but that specialty bolt is like $15. So I just picked up one with the same thread for only a couple bucks at a hardware store, and I'm going to make a custom 3D printed spacer to take up this gap. That way it'll work just as good as OEM. Then here in the back, we've got a brake caliper that's an OEM, so that should be plenty good quality, and it's already got the e-brake cable. Delete, because I'm not going to be needing that. Then right here, we've got probably the second most expensive item on the table here, which is a set of Pro Taper grips, and these I scored for only $20 on Facebook Marketplace. And these are the ones that have the flex control. Right here in the middle has a little dial you turn that controls how much the handlebars can flex. These retail for about $170, so 20 bucks is not bad. But let's go ahead. I got to clean up some of these used parts, and then we can start assembling this and get it mocked up on the bike. Well, it didn't take too much to get these cleaned up to the point where I'm happy with them. But now I'm going to go ahead and try and reassemble this rear axle, because off camera I went ahead, replaced the seals and bearings inside of my hub carrier, and then also put in the new bearings inside of my swing arm here. One thing I just want to show you guys here real quick is I went ahead and did the grease mod, or whatever you want to call it, to the swing arm pivot bolt. All you have to do is tap in a grease zerk on the end. I went ahead and did both ends, because why not? Then I can grease it from either side of the machine I'm on. I don't have to put a plug in it. And then I just drilled a couple holes on both sides, and now I should be able to make it greasable. You guys can look it up in videos on how to do this. It's straightforward. But a friend just referred it to me, so I said, okay, I'll do that. But yeah, let's go ahead and get this thing assembled. Well, guys, I just realized I don't have the snap ring that goes right here on the brake bracket, so I'm not going to be able to work on this right now. For the meantime, though, I'm going to go ahead and harvest the rear swing arm and suspension mounts off of this YFZ 450 frame. So we're going to be getting this whole hoop, and then we're going to cut it off down here. Excuse the cat. Well, I got this piece and the little shock mount bracket harvested off of the frame over there. And safe to say I got it cleaned up pretty good. All this grinding here is just from where there were additional brackets and stuff that I'm just not going to need. So I got those all ground off. But what's nice is once I get this all bolted to the swing arm, I'll set the swing arm where I want it and just weld this in place. So it doesn't really matter, because I'll set the swing arm and the axle how I want it, and then this will just be set. And then here's that little shock bracket, which I'm actually impressed how well I got it off. And then it was smaller diameter pipes. All I did was smash it down onto the large diameter that I'm going to be welding this onto, and it spread the kind of the circle apart. And so now all I have to do is weld this on. Well, got the C-clip in today, so we can go ahead and get this rear axle all assembled. This was literally the last piece I needed. There you have it. Should fit right over this. I'll double check, but yep, that seems about right. Oh, here's something I want to show you guys real quick. Here's that the bolt, you know, that goes in here. And then I had a metal spacer, and then I just heated it up and essentially pressed it down into this ABS 3D printed plastic that is solid, and it fits perfect in there, and it actually turned out looking pretty clean. My dang pliers ain't quite big enough. Yep.
Nice.
I believe I have this oriented right. I'm going to slide it in this way and get my sprocket and everything on this end. I know this is pretty obvious for people who have YFZ 450s, but when you've never messed with one before and you're working with the parts, it's kind of hard to tell. I'm pretty sure some people have said putting a little grease in there. So we'll put a little bit in there, why not? I'm going to go ahead and put grease on this axle shaft. That way if any water gets in here, it doesn't rust, because I noticed it was starting to rust inside of here. So if I'm doing something wrong, you guys can yell at me, but I won't be able to hear you. I've seen many people fight with these. Oh, shoot. Give me a second, I'll fiddle with this off camera for a second. Okay, so I finally got that ring on. That's what was going on here. And basically how I did it is I just put the axle and rested this on the ground there. Had this pipe which just fits over. And I just went wham, and I slammed it. And it pushed it on. So that was a lifesaver. You hold the inside of this nut. It's got flat spots, but apparently you don't need a wrench. That's what they say. And then you just kind of do this, and it's going to use that ring that we just installed that was a pain in the balls, and it's going to push against that and essentially expand the axle and pull it. Well, push it actually. It's going to go, so it's extending outwards right now. That feels pretty darn good. Well, with the rear axle position and everything, I noticed this bracket's going to come right in line with the pipe there. And we still have a pretty big gap, of course. So we're probably going to cut it off right in there. And then it should kind of set closer down. We've definitely got a much more manageable gap that I can weld in. And now I'm going to spend the next few minutes just getting this rear axle aligned how I want it. And then we'll tack that in. Real quick, I'll show you guys how I'm doing this for those who care. What I'm doing is I'm going to base the rear axle off of the center bar that goes all the way through. And I want to make sure that that bar, I'm basing everything off of a square with the rest of the machine. So I'm taking this giant square here, and I'm seeing what number lines up with the center of this bottom ball joint, because that's what matters the most. And then I also, just for good measure, I take the tape measure and go to there and also measure to the center. I take that measurement and I do the exact same on that side, and I've come within a 1/16 of an inch. So that means I've built the frame so far pretty square, and that means I can base the rear axle off of this. Well, you guys saw me put this bar here, and that's just so I can get on this and actually test out the suspension without having to worry about this piece bending in. It's just temporary tacked. And if we get on this thing, the rear suspension actually feels perfect, which I was a little worried about. But it actually seems like it's going to be just right, and I can adjust the preload. It's the front suspension, however, that when we feel it, I mean, I can almost bottom it out. In fact, I'm getting the frame to touch. So I'm probably going to cut these shock mounts, mount them out to the outside, and hopefully that makes these shocks strong enough. Okay, well, it's a new day, and I got these all welded up, and I just got them tacked in. But while I was testing this off camera, I was pushing on this, and I was watching these shock mounts to make sure that they weren't buckling or anything. And so I was pressing down, and all of a sudden, this one just folds up. And it was about all the way up here, and this section of pipe right in here was bent in about a 1/2 inch. That raised the concern of, even when this is fully welded, is this section of pipe going to be thick enough since it's such thin wall? So that's why I got this pipe. It should fit perfectly inside of here. I'll cut a length that goes in between these two supports, and then we'll drill a bunch of holes and weld it in there. That way this is super thick in here, and of course we'll do the same on the other side. That way we do not have to worry about this section of frame collapsing once we start jumping it and doing all that. And now the suspension was still a little soft, but I have a solution for that coming. In the meantime though, we're gonna go ahead and start working on the rear framing. Okay, once again, I got another change of plans. I think we're actually gonna work on making this brace permanent, and that's because it'll be easiest to get this thing tacked into place. Then we can take the motor out, get these pieces that I cut for those, and just fully weld everything, finally get all this fully welded in. So for this brace, we're gonna be doing basically very similar to what we already have, except here, instead of direct weld, it's gonna be bolted because it's gonna be permanently welded to this piece, so we need it to be able to be removable. Well, I went ahead and pulled the motor. That way we can get all of this frame welded up. I figure since it's easy enough and we're gonna be adding weight, I wanna make sure that nothing's gonna bend or break like we already had happen. So I'm gonna get these pieces inserted in there. That way the front suspension is fully stiffened up. Then we're gonna finish welding this brace up, and we're gonna add some additional pieces in here to support this post better, since we have weight transfer going through it.
All right, guys, sorry, but I'm a little sick, unfortunately, right now. So bear with me. I know my voice is terrible. You guys can turn on captions if you want. So now that everything's fully welded, I'm going to go ahead and work on stiffening the front suspension, which I want to show you guys my solution. Right here. These are mountain bike shocks. Now, for granted, there is no gas in this. It's just a spring. But I still have the dampening of my main shocks, and in the future I can upgrade to dampening. I just didn't want to spend the money. But right now, I can just weld these in right here. So we'll have dual shocks. We'll still have the big ones too, but we're going to be running dual shocks. And then this, I believe, is a 750 pounds per inch. So they're pretty stiff, but you can get all the way up to 1 ton per inch. So and I can go down to 500. So I can only go down one step, but I can go up basically as much as I'm going to need. I'm going to go ahead and fab up some mounts. I got those brackets right there. I'm going to make up some mounts, and then we'll finally have all the suspension done for this thing since the rear's already taken care of. So I didn't use those brackets because I didn't think the material was going to be heavy enough for what I wanted. So I just made some out of these. It was like strap iron. It takes a lot of work, but you do get some nice brackets at the end. As you can see, the top's already tacked in. I'm just getting ready to tack in the bottom ones, and then we'll take this all apart, fully weld them in, and we'll get to fully test out this suspension. So I'm super excited about that. All right, guys, with the new shocks on, it almost feels like it could be too stiff. Like I say, I could go softer if I needed, but we'll see once I get the motor put on. So I'm going to go ahead, pull this thing up, install the motor. I'm not going to bother filming it because you guys have seen it plenty of times, and it's going to keep on happening. It's just the process of building this thing and making sure I'm doing the right thing. Well, guys, I'm not quite sure. I'm wondering if it's going to be a little too stiff, because when I push on it like that, I mean, I don't know. That almost seems a little stiff. Now, I can definitely adjust the preload, and that will help. But before we can fully test that, we need to get some wheels on. Well, guys, these tires here I got for about $150 for the pair, and I went with small tires for two reasons. Number one, being I wanted to be able to get out of the hole quick and accelerate quickly. And one of the things is you get small tires that's low rotational mass, so you can spend less energy getting the tires turning, and then use the rest of that energy to accelerating the tires. But I've actually gone with 18s and 19s. So yeah, up front, these 19-inch tires, they're 7 inches wide, and they should work out pretty dang well. Then these rear tires, like I already mentioned, they're 18s, they're 9.5 inches wide. So I should get enough, well, I'm never gonna have enough traction, but I should get decent traction for the cost of having the small tire. And that brings me to my second reason why I went with these small tires, is because of the looks. You gotta remember, it's been a while, but I'm putting the Ford Raptor body on this thing. And the Ford Raptor had about 16-inch wheels on it, and these are 18, so this should actually be pretty proportionate to the plastic body that I'm gonna be putting on this project. So that's the other thing, is I figured if I can get performance and looks out of these tires, that's phenomenal. But anyhow, that's enough talking. Let's go ahead and get these installed. Well, as you guys know, the first step to putting new tires on is getting the old ones off. And lucky for me, I've got a tire machine that'll do that really easy for me. I don't know if you guys, yeah, you guys can see that. That is nasty right there. Holy. I don't even know what that is. Let's see if we can stomp this on out of here. Basically, you got this lower deal. You got a foot pedal over here, and you can blast air. Now, if I had a real car tire, it's got these little things that you press down. Woo! Yeah, but unfortunately, we can't do that. But I don't know if this thing will take. Well, that wasn't too bad. Up, and just like that, you heard the bead setting at only about 20 psi. Can see we got a little seepage there, but that should go away. If not, well, then we'll put some bead sealer on it. I did clean the beads really well. That's the one thing you want to clean the best. If you're going to clean the rims at all, which you should, you want to clean the beads as good as you can get them, because that's the sealing surface of the tire. But no, looks pretty dang good. One down, 43 more to go. That's actually perfect. This rebound light's questionable because the rebound dampening adjustment's all the way down there, and it's like it must run through the shaft, or through the shock shaft. So that's interesting, but it does work. So I can't confirm these cheap eBay shocks do work. Now, the reason you guys see these tires moving in and out when I'm pushing this thing and binding up and just jumping on it, the reason they do this, because of the way I have the caster set up. This has paused, I think it's native caster, or I don't know, it's either one. And so it's actually leaning forward, whereas most cars are leaning back. So as you turn, they automatically center. Whereas these are gonna be more unstable, so they're gonna wanna turn. And for what I'm planning, you know, I'm not gonna be doing a whole lot of straight line cruising with this thing. So that's why I went with this. And like I say, if I don't like it, I can always change it. I figured the next easiest thing to work on would be the jack shaft. And so I went ahead and got a bunch of parts in for it. I went with the 3/4 inch shaft for multiple reasons. Mainly because it seems like it should be able to handle all the power that I want to put through it while still being pretty small and saving weight. But probably the other most important thing is I could actually get sprockets that somewhat fit over them. I am going to have to do a modification, but you guys will see that. So here it is. Looks like it actually should be pretty nice. I don't necessarily need it keyed. I'm going to be welding sprockets directly to it, but I couldn't find any plain, just like solid shaft, so that'll have to do. Next up here, we've just got a 520, and I want to say this is like a 17 tooth or something like that. I think that's what that part number means. But this is what I decided to go with there. The deal with it is it's actually too big in diameter. I know I throw it to the side, but it's too big in diameter, so I'm gonna have to shim it and then weld it and get that figured out. Then in here is, I have two of these. These are identical. These are 530 18 tooth sprockets, and these are actually too small because this is a 18 millimeter opening and 3/4 inch is around 19. So definitely some modification, but it's the best I could get. Then in here, hide all that, have to blur that, is the 520 chain I went with. I know it's niche brand. Now, like I use the actual and niche brand stuff, I understand that it's not the highest quality, but I actually haven't had a problem with their chains. I've actually used quite a few of them. And the axle I am a little nervous about, but I didn't want to go spend a ton of money, like $400 on an axle for the rear end, just to find out that this project isn't going to work. So that's why I'm going cheap to start with, and I can always upgrade later. Then in here is some pillow block bearings that look like they got chewed into by some mice. Now I have 4 of these because I have to have 2 jack shafts actually, and well, they're pretty good. So anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and start modifying these sprockets to make sure that they actually slip over the 3/4 inch shaft. Alright guys, well I told you I had to grind down these sprockets to make them work, so I'll show you. Okay, so here's a new sprocket. You can see those teeth for the splines. They're pretty big actually, if the camera will focus. And then we have another one I've taken. As you can see, I've ground down the teeth quite a bit to make them slip over this 3/4 inch shaft. I'm trying to be super accurate. That way I ensure I have good drive line. But basically what I'm doing is I'm taking the measurement at this bottom. I have the dial indicator set to 0. And then I'm going to pull this off. And it's a pretty good snug fit. This is one I've ground, of course. Otherwise it wouldn't be able to be on the shaft. And then we're going to go about 180. Right in there somewhere. Okay, there you go. It's back on. And as you can see, now we're off by about 3 thousandths, 1/8. And I've gone around this thing before. And that's honestly about as bad as it gets. The first one I did here is definitely worse. It's got about 10, 15 thou run out up and down. But also keep in mind that that's still pretty minuscule amount. And I've done some research and it sounds like I have about 30 thou to work with. And so, of course, as we weld on this, that'll also change. So welding this on will be a tricky process. But I just wanted to show you guys kind of how I'm trying to do this accurately to ensure that I have a nice, good drive line. Now that the gears are all ground down, I got the shaft cut to length, and so here's what it's going to look like on the quad. This is the front half, so there'll be a sprocket off the transmission, comes to this sprocket, then of course this one will be on the same shaft, runs over here, jumps back, and then goes to the rear axle of the four-wheeler. I'm going to jump in here really quick to show you guys my spreadsheet that I use for keeping track of the gearing and also coming up with what gears I need in the first place. So I have this little diagram down here to help me keep track of the gears, and then it also shows the flow of power. Next thing I did is create this little chart, and I started by just picking out some random numbers and then calculating the ratios between them. Then I plugged these ratios into here, which is part of a calculation that multiplies all these ratios or all these numbers right in here to give me the mile an hour, which was the most important thing I wanted. I wanted to have a top speed of around 100 mile an hour, which if I plug in our red line, we're right there. And then also at a cruising RPM, going back to 7,000, we're at a nice highway speed that's achievable without pushing the motor at a reasonable RPM. Going back down to idle, we're taking off around 3 mile an hour in first gear, which is a nice, relatively slow speed that'll help multiply the torque of the engine, because four-cylinder motorcycle engines do not have very good torque at such a low RPM. So this helps just make it easier to take off, especially when you're in those situations where you're uphill or just facing a lot of rolling resistance. But next thing we need to do is get these sprockets welded in, which is going to be a very time-consuming process because we got to make sure that they do not warp when we weld them. It's the next day, and it's getting cold out. I'm having to put more layers on. But we're getting these sprockets welded up, and I just got this one tacked in place. This is going to be the most difficult one because it was oversized, so I had to get it correctly spaced. But as you can see, I'm measuring right in there in the low spot, and as you can see, the low spot's about 3 thousandths under. We go down here, maybe a couple thousandths off. Let's go ahead and go all the way to the other side of the sprocket, and we're still within 1 to 2 thousandths. So that is fantastic. I just finished up with this first mid shaft here, and as you can tell by watching that dial indicator, we have a spike to maybe 8 or 9 thousandths, but for the most part, it stays well within a good spec. Got that first mid shaft mounted on the unit, just fabricated up some support blocks, and next thing to do is just get a bar going from that intersection down to right in there. That way we can have a bar running beneath here and do the same support blocks underneath that. And I just want to showcase this mistake I made earlier is I accidentally made it so the drain plug intersected almost right dead center with that tube. Once again, I've done a fair amount of work off camera. I apologize for that, but it's been a very tedious process to get where I'm at now. I made these uprights out of a piece of strap iron. As you can see, they're not quite a 1/4 inch thick. And then I made cut slots in them, which was very time consuming. Got them welded in place, and I've got this side braced already. And then this side, I got to figure something else out because it's going to be a little more tricky. Went ahead and got this jack shaft aligned with the rear sprocket, and I've got a laser on there to really help me out there. And then once I know that this sprocket's lined up, I can then match these two sprockets, and that's what I'm getting ready to do, is weld the back side of this sprocket so it's lined up with that one, and that's why I have this straight edge clamped to that sprocket. Finally got this sprocket welded on. Everything seems good. It did take a while though, about 3.5 hours. It's warmer out today, so the welds don't cool as quick. The goal is to do this when it's colder out. I'll do this next sprocket, and this whole process will go faster. But in the meantime, I'm going to get a brace made up from this piece to over there, just like I did here, except it'll be at an angle. So now that I've got my piece cut to fit in there, I can't weld to this powder coat. So I found that the easiest way to take care of it is to just use the torch. Turn the acetylene that way, it's not putting out that black soot. But then just burn away.
Dang, this thing's welding like crap. Those are the same settings I always use.
Well, guys, that wasn't welding worth the crap. And it turns out they actually gave me pure argon instead of the mix. So I had to run back to town. It's a new day. As you can see, it's an extremely foggy morning out. Anyhow, I got some fresh argon that's actually the right stuff. It's a 75-25 mix. So I'm going to go ahead and finish getting this welded up, but actually hopefully put some decent welds on it this time. I went ahead and grabbed the Raptor body off the shelf there. I'm going to start working on this rear frame, so I wanted to get a glimpse of what I need. And of course, it's going to have to be extended back, so the body's actually probably going to get cut near where that door line is right there. The next step is going to be taking those tubes right there that I've already prepared and going to be welding them onto these upright pieces and coming back and then eventually joining them to these outgoing pieces here in the back.
What's interesting is I've never thought about using this square to hold pieces like this until now, but it actually makes life really easy, and I can hold the part at the elevation that I need it. And then I can double check it with this.
And I've got it all tacked. I've got to make sure that, it's in line this way with the frame. So I set up my laser again on the tripod, and then I set it. If you actually look, besides for that upright piece right there, which is actually welded in, you can tell that starting right there and following this laser up all the way to the end, it stays basically in the center. So that's how I know that I've got basically this whole side of the frame relatively straight. So the next thing I want to do is actually weld a brace that goes from here to here. It's really starting to take shape with this rear framing done. The next thing though is to go ahead and add some stiffeners, because right now it's pretty weak. We're going to put this piece right in here, and then I have another piece that's going to go on the other side, although it is a little bit different because this part of the hoop sticks out more than this side. All right, it's hard to get a clear shot because of this tube right here, but you can already tell by looking at them that this one ends before that one does over there. There's kind of a clear view, and like I said, that's all just due to the variation in the hoop there. I also need to add a stiffener in here, so I went ahead and got some pieces whipped up that are going to be like that.
Check out this nice beanie I got for Christmas, guys. It's got an LED light up here, and then right here, it's actually got heated pads, and that's how you control them there. So it actually keeps me nice and warm. By just adding these 4 stiffeners, we've definitely increased the strength of this rear framing now. I can stand on this, and I can even lift it up off the jack stands without it bending or warping too much. That's pretty exciting. And then of course, I still got to add a stiffener from here to here, and then I think that'll tie in the front and the back half of the frames in nicely, and that should add all the rigidity I think we're going to need. But I think that's going to call it for part 2 of this series. In the next video, I want to work on the steering, as that's going to be a real challenge. We're going to have to somehow go down here, go up to the front, and then do a bunch of magic, and hopefully we'll end up with a reliable steering system. But anyhow, that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.